The haunting truth behind Pineville. The last day of summer. It was the last evening of summer, and Pineville, a small, sleepy town, nestled between two rugged hills, seemed to slow down as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was thick with an unsettling calm that clung to the town like a forgotten secret. Life here had always been predictable, almost uneventful. But tonight, something felt different, like the calm before a storm. Susan Archer, a mother of two, had just tucked her children into bed. Her husband, Tim, was away on business for a company called Trick Industries. To most in Pineville, the name meant little. But to Susan, it meant her husband's absence. He worked long hours, and tonight was no different. It was just another quiet night until something strange happened. As Susan made her rounds, locking the doors and checking the windows, she noticed the time on her phone, 10:32 p.m. A soft knock echoed through the quiet house. It was so out of place, so unnatural for this sleepy town, that it made her skin crawl. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the door handle. Another knock, louder this time. Curiosity, tinged with unease, propelled her forward. She peered through the peephole but saw nothing. Only the dark, empty street stretching out before her. The air felt colder than it should have. A shiver ran down her spine as a gust of wind rushed past her, almost as though it was urging her to close the door. Her hand trembled as she locked the door twice, the sound of her heartbeat deafening in the silence. Turning back toward her bedroom, she felt an unease settle into her chest, but she shrugged it off. The house was secure, her children safe. But then her phone rang. Startled, Susan glanced at the unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. A feeling of dread settled deep within her as she answered. "Hello," she whispered, her voice trembling. The voice on the other end was deep, distorted, and chilling. "You should have closed the door sooner, Susan." Her heart skipped a beat. "Who is this?" She managed to ask, but the line went dead before she could get an answer. Shaking, Susan rushed to her children's rooms, checking on them. They were sound asleep, untouched. Safe, yet the cold feeling remained. The next morning, she convinced herself it was just a pranksome kind of sick joke. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister was happening. 2 days later, Tim returned home from his business trip, but he wasn't alone. He had brought Jared, a new hire from Trick Industries. Tim had promised to help Jared settle into Pineville, and although he was polite, something about the young man didn't sit right with Susan. His gaze lingered too long on everything, his eyes scanning their home as though memorizing its every corner. Later that night, as Susan lay in bed next to Tim, she whispered, "There's something wrong about Jared. I don't trust him." Tim chuckled softly, dismissing her concerns. "He's just a kid, honey, probably nervous about his new job. Don't worry." But Susan couldn't ignore the feeling. The next morning, she caught Jared standing at the edge of their property, staring up at their windows. His presence unnerved her. She knew he was watching them. A week later, Jared disappeared. No one knew where he had gone. His apartment was untouched, his belongings still neatly packed. Vanished without a trace. And no one seemed to care except for Susan. That same night, Susan's phone rang again. The same voice, more menacing this time. "Do you know where Jared is, Susan?" Fear gripped her heart. "Who is this? What do you want?" The voice chuckled darkly. "You know more than you think." Then the line went dead. The next few days were filled with whispers, hushed conversations in Pineville. People were talking about Trick Industries and what was happening inside the sprawling grey building on the outskirts of town. Some believed it was a research facility. Others whispered it was tied to the government. But no one knew for sure. And then there was the disappearance of Jared. When Susan confronted Tim about it, he dismissed her concerns. "It's not our problem," he said. "People come and go. Jared probably just got cold feet and left." But Susan wasn't convinced. There was something far darker at play here, something that wasn't just about a missing person, it was about the very fabric of Pineville itself. She began digging. One night, she searched through Tim's home office, hoping to find something that could explain what was going on. It was then she stumbled upon a folder labeled Project Solstice. Inside, the documents were heavily redacted, but there were enough words to make her blood run cold. Human trials, classified testing, possible casualties. Her hands shook as she dropped the folder. What was Tim involved in? The next morning, Susan confronted him. What is Project Solstice, Tim? What is Trick Industries really doing? For the first time, Susan saw fear in Tim's eyes. You need to drop this. You don't understand. It's bigger than both of us. But Susan couldn't let it go. She had to know the truth. She went to Jared's apartment, but it had been cleared out as if he had never lived there. Desperate, she reached out to other employees at Trick, but they all gave her the same cold response. No comment. That night, her phone rang again. The voice came through, louder, more ominous than before. You shouldn't be asking questions, Susan. Who are you? Why are you doing this? She demanded. The voice let out a low, menacing laugh. You're in too deep now. Stay away from Trick Industries, or you'll end up like Jared. The call ended abruptly. Susan knew she had crossed a line, but she couldn't stop. The truth was just within reach, and she wasn't about to back down. The next day, she drove to Trick Industries, parking down the road to observe from a distance. The employees came and went, but there was a tension in the airy sense of unease that lingered like a storm on the horizon. Then, a black SUV pulled up behind her. A man in a suit stepped out. Mrs. Archer, you need to come with us. Her heart raced. Who are you? The man leaned in, his eyes dark and unreadable. Someone who can help you if you want to know the truth about Jared. Susan hesitated, but something inside her urged her to follow him. The SUV took her to a remote warehouse on the edge of town. And inside, she saw a room filled with monitors showing live feeds from all around Pineville parks, streets, homes. But the most chilling part was the people on the screens, her neighbors, her friends, even her own family. They were being watched, tracked, and controlled. At the center of it all was a file labeled Project Solstice, surveillance data. The man's voice was grim. Trick isn't just a company. They've been watching everyone in this town for years. They're controlling everything, every person, every thought, every action. And those who don't cooperate disappear. Susan's stomach twisted. Jared, they got rid of him because he knew too much. The man nodded. He tried to leave. They couldn't let him go. And they won't let you either, Susan. Her heart pounded. What do you mean? The man's expression hardened. I can help you, but it comes with a price. Susan's mind raced. What kind of price? He looked at her, his face unreadable. You have to leave, disappear. If you stay, they'll come for you, just like they did for Jared. This is your only chance. The world seemed to spin around her. Abandon her life, her family, everything she knew. But she couldn't stay, not when she knew too much. With a heavy heart, she nodded. Okay, he'll do it. The man handed her a small black bag. There's enough money here to get you started. Go somewhere far, somewhere they can find you. Susan left the warehouse in a daze. Hours later, she stood at the edge of Pineville, the lights of the town fading behind her. She knew she could never return, never see her family again. But she also knew it was the only way to keep them safe. Her phone buzzed one last time. A text message from an unknown number. It simply read 13. Her stomach twisted. She didn't know what it meant. But one thing was clear, it wasn't over. Not yet. Somewhere, deep in the shadows of Pineville, someone was still watching.